Welcome to Mayo 360, the podcast, where we'll delve into all topics related to myofunctional therapy, including airway health, snoring, sleep apnea, TMJ, tongue ties, thumb sucking, and even bedwetting. As a myofunctional therapist, sleep coach, functional breathing instructor, and formal dental hygienist, I'm sharing stories and tips to help you identify if myofunctional therapy is right for you and how it can help improve your overall health. Are you ready to feel better? Visit the show notes and take our quiz. Is myofunctional therapy right for me? Find the quiz to see how myofunctional therapy can help you and your family live your best life. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Mayo 360, holistic solutions for better sleep and better breathing. I am your host, Becca Rose. Thanks for joining us again today. So today I'd like to talk about a client experience that is a little bit atypical. It's not the normal situation of people who would typically find me. What I mean by this is that this woman found me and she didn't really have any major issues. This lady, she found me because she read a particular book. It's written by James Nestor. The book is called Breath, the New Science of a Lost Art. I cannot tell you how many people have found myofunctional therapy after reading that book. So if it is not one you've heard of before, I definitely recommend reading it. And you are guaranteed to learn things that you never knew about unless you are really already deeply engaged in the airway and myofunctional therapy space and breathing space. So with the book, a lot of people, their eyes opened, like their aha moment finally happened. And that was the case in this lady who reached out to me. She is in her mid-30s and she is in really good health. Now, I finished her case probably about 6 months ago. I worked with her for about 9 months or so, but she did not have severe issues until she came to see me. So once she read the book, her aha moment happened. And she started to realize how things in her life have been affected by mouth breathing. She didn't realize she was a mouth breather. She snored a little bit, but she's a little tired, but it doesn't affect my life. She didn't have a really significant health history or she wasn't on medications. But after learning about her mouth posture and how detrimental just a little bit of snoring could be, she started doing her own research. She's a very healthy woman and she does yoga and other types of body modalities just to help keep her limber and moving. She does a lot of hiking and some high intensity exercise. And again, she's only in her 30s, so she takes really good care of herself, but she did not realize how much mouth breathing and snoring was playing a role on her overall health. Now, the reason I wanted to talk about this case today is because it's not the norm, right? Normally, somebody knows they have this major issue and then they seek out myofunctional therapy. She found me after doing a Google search. I was the closest one to her location, which is about an hour from me. She came over and we did a virtual Zoom call, which is always the first step. I want to have a discovery call with you. And we chatted and I really don't know if I have any problems, but I read this book and it really intrigued me. And since I have a high focus on overall health in general, I just want to make sure that my airway health is good and that my tongue works the way it's supposed to. She came in and we did her evaluation. So during the evaluation, I determined that she had a rather significant posterior tongue tie. And if you'll remember, the posterior tongue tie is the fascial tissue that's behind the string underneath your tongue. It's not just about that string. It's about how that fascial tissue embeds into the floor of your mouth and at the bottom of your tongue. And then that fascial tissue goes through and intertwines between the rest of your body all the way down to your toes. Reference back to some of our previous episodes that talk more about the tongue tie specifics if you want to learn more information about that. She came in for her evaluation and she was just really shocked in a good way, not in the, oh my God, what's wrong with me kind of way, but in a way like, wow, there's this whole other component of my health. And there's this whole other component that could potentially make my health decline as I get older that she had no idea about. And for that reason, yep, I need to do myofunctional therapy because, yeah, I knew I snored a little bit, but I didn't think it was a big deal. But now I'm aware of, wow, I can't swallow. Like it's too much effort. And now I know what my tongue can't do. So some of the conversations we have together talk about if you have a little bit of trouble swallowing right now, or you're choking on water, or it goes down the wrong pipe more often than it should, those issues tend to get worse as you get older because the muscles never worked really efficiently to begin with. And as we get older, we lose even more tone in those muscles. And then some of those functions start to go downhill even more. So she was looking at this from a preventative standpoint. She was looking at what can I do now in my mid 30s to make sure that I don't become a 60-year-old or a 70 or 80-year-old who can't breathe and ends up on a CPAP machine. And recently, most of my patients coming in lately have been in their 60s and 70s because I've seen these people, these older people coming in lately. It reminded me of her because it was like, wow, this lady, she's being preventative. She's looking at the long term. And then she doesn't want to become the 60 or 70-year-old that has to deal with choking all the time and being on a CPAP machine. The point is that she was looking at it as a preventative measure to not be in the position that a lot of times we get put into unintentionally as we grow older. We already have so much stuff to worry about as we get older. The last thing we should have to worry about is whether or not we're going to end up on a CPAP machine because our muscles are weak or our jaws are too small and we don't have enough airway space. I ask you, if you are in a position where you know you snore, you have trouble swallowing, or it feels clunky and uncoordinated and it's stressful, do something about it while you can. Because even though you may not be 6 or 7 years old, when you're 30, 40, 50 years old, it's so much easier to help guide these habits than when you already have a severe problem with your airway. You already have severe sleep apnea. You can always improve your health and your situation, even if you are 70 years old. But if you can do it when you're young and prevent some of the issues or reduce the risk for the severity of these issues, let's do it while we're young. She came in, she had a tongue tie that was much more significant than she expected. And she asked me to connect her with a tongue tie release provider, which I did. I will say, if I'm guesstimating off the top of my head, that probably about 75% of my clients decide that, nope, I don't want to do a tongue tie release. At least they don't decide that right away. They want to see if they can get more improvement to their symptoms with just myofunctional therapy before they rush into getting a procedure. So I would say about 75% don't want one or end up not having one. Even though we talk about it, they need to know where the limitations are, where the barriers are. That becomes integrated. It becomes new neuromuscular memory. That's her myofunctional therapy for the rest of her life. She's going to help maintain her airway for the rest of her life by allowing her muscles to work the way they are intended, the way they are coordinated, or she's going to learn how to coordinate them the way that they should be. To, but she could not believe after she had her functional tongue tie reliefs how much reduction in tension she had, not just through her head and her jaw and her neck, but in her whole body. And she told me examples about how when she would get down to do her stretching at the end of the day, that she always had trouble turning her head to one direction. So she would lay on the floor and she'd do these things with her arms and she would twist her head in like an awkward kind of way. But she showed me how she did this and how she could never quite get her head and her ear all the way down to the floor on one side of her body. And then after her release, I could move my head so with so little effort. Like it almost took me by surprise that my head just went there when I've been struggling to do this for pretty much 10 years. And it just happened because it released so much tension. And then she told me other stories about how, yeah, she snored and sleep was disruptive and sleep was affected by work and stress, just like it is for all of us. But even on her stressful days, she slept amazing. She slept so much better, and she fell asleep faster, and she was able to keep her tongue on the roof of the mouth, and if she did wake up in the night, her tongue was up, and she had so much self-awareness, which is really a big part of myofunctional therapy. You have to be able to describe to me what is happening, and that's a big part of how I know that you're doing the exercise the way it's intended to be done. How are you going to know if I'm doing it right? I know that you're doing it right because of what I see, what I observe, and what you tell me. Because I know how those muscles are supposed to move or how they're supposed to coordinate with other things. And I can see whether that's happening or not. So that's why it's so helpful that everything we do together can be 100% virtual. If you are not in my area, it does not matter. Today, as a matter of fact, I did an evaluation for a lady in her early 70s in a state in the South. So I'm in Wisconsin. So she was in a southern state and she found out about this from a podcast that I was a guest on. And she knew that she had to address some of her issues. And so she reached out and we did her entire evaluation virtually. She does not need to be in my office for that. I mailed her the things she needed and we did it all virtually. And then every single appointment from there is going to be virtual. So it does not matter where you live, but she was just blown away with everything we did, okay, and everything she experienced. The sleep was probably the biggest thing for her because you hear me talk all the time about when you don't sleep good, you're cranky, you're crabby. I get mad, I get angry, I lose my temper. I'm not a happy person when I don't sleep well. And when you don't sleep well, night after night, for years and years and years, it takes its toll. Look back at some of the episodes where I talk about my own story and my insomnia and my sleep apnea. So she didn't realize until she slept good how much her bad sleep was impacting her life and impacting her stress levels and then impacting her job. And then once she had her tongue tie released and she had those stressful days at work, it didn't impact her so much. She was able to deal with it better. But when you don't have constant tension pulling you down all the time, it's just a little bit of weight of the world being lifted off your shoulders. She did amazing. She was very self aware. She was very dedicated to the process. She did everything I asked her to. And when she couldn't, she reached out to me and we modified and made sure she could do what she needed to do. And then when she was all done, she came back to my office and I did a mini version of her initial evaluation. So I take some new pictures, I take some new measurements, and then I put together a little before and after because the process is long. Myofunctional therapy is not fast. And sometimes throughout the journey, you forget where you started. You forget what you felt like, or you forget how restricted your tongue was. And then you see the after. You're like, wow, my face looks so much more toned. Wow, look how much more my tongue can move. Even the facial measurements change and you just get more tightening in your muscles. And aesthetically, there can be a lot of improvements as well. That's not why I do it for you, but there are aesthetic changes that happen too. You just have more tone, a more defined jawline in some people. You can see your facial features better because we're working on all of these muscles. We're not just working on the tongue. So even if you decided not to have a tongue tie release, you are still going to have improvements of symptoms because muscles are muscles and they do the job that they're supposed to do. But how far you get depends on how restricted the tongue is. And we talk about those things on an individual case based on what your situation is. So I thought it would be nice to start the year with a really encouraging patient story. She didn't know she had these things, but then once she had the information and she was able to think about her own life and her own patterns and the things that bothered her physically, she had an answer. And then once all these pieces were put together, it was the perfect step for her to take so that she could maintain the health that she currently has and eliminate the chances of her airway health from significant decline as she increases in age. So I was so extremely proud of her, and I still am. If you're wondering if myofunctional therapy is right for you, visit the show notes. We have a free quiz. Is myofunctional therapy right for me? It will take you through a series of questions, and most of them, if you answer yes, you are most likely a good candidate for myofunctional therapy. And then it will also give you a free breathing activity from me that I recorded for you. And it can guide you through a basic breathing exercise to help with stress and to help with sleep. So, as always, reach out if you have any questions and visit my website, myofunctionalpathways.com. Schedule your free discovery call and I will answer your questions and we will get you started on your myofunctional therapy and just improve the quality of your life and your sleep.
Now for the fine print. The information presented in this podcast is for educational purposes only and should not be taken as medical advice. We recommend consulting with a qualified healthcare professional for any questions or concerns you may have regarding your specific health condition.